Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of a day in the life of an air hostess, so let's get on with the video. Takeoff and landing can be the time when emergencies can happen, so a lot of cabin crew do actually sit in silence during this time and wait for the captain or the first officer to let them know when they can actually move around the cabin. A lot of cabin crew don't, however, and they use this time as a chance to have a good old gossip. If you're working at the front of the aircraft, the first thing that you will do is go into the flight deck and ask the captain and the first officer what they would like to drink and also what they would like to eat and when they would like to eat. When I was working for Air Europe as cabin crew, we used to eat on turnaround, but sometimes if the flight is delayed, then the airline will want to make up some time, and that time will come from the turnaround period, which means that there will be a lot of rushing around for the cabin crew to get the aircraft ready for the passengers returning home. And so this will mean that there isn't a lot of time for the cabin crew to actually sit down and have a meal. And this could be quite frustrating, especially if you've been up early and you've been on a long flight out there and you were looking forward to a sit down and something to eat. Anyway, back to the flight. So after this, you will begin your drink service, and this will mean setting up the bar trolleys, usually with a nice display of the drinks that you have on offer, and also the ice and some lemon, because everybody likes lemon with their gin and tonic, don't they? So if it's a single aisle aircraft, then the cabin crew will start at either end. So 2 cabin crew at the front of the aircraft and then 2 cabin crew coming from the rear, and then you will meet in the middle, and that's when you finish the drink service. Following the drink service, a cabin crew will go through the cabin with the waste trolley. When I was working for Air Europe, we didn't have a waste trolley, so we would have to collect all of the waste on trays. We would then tip the waste that we'd collected into a massive gash bag that was kept in the galley. But I must say, these days, using trolleys to collect the waste is much more efficient. Following this, the cabin crew will give the passengers a little bit of a break to have their drinks and any snacks. Then they will give out the food to the passengers who've actually ordered food. And if anybody, there's a big wasp in here, which I might want, it might be a bee actually. I'll have to get that out in a minute. Anyway, back to the flight. Any passengers that ring their call bell during the flight must be attended to as soon as possible. So it could be that they are ringing their call bell because they just want another drink. It could be they're ringing their call bell because they want a blanket because they're too cold, or it could be that they don't feel well, or it could be that they are having a heart attack. So obviously it is very, very important for the cabin crew to go to the passenger immediately once they have rung their call bell. Also, during the flight, the toilets must be checked every so often so that they are clean and they are tidy for passengers to go into. And if there's anything that needs restocking in the toilets, then this must also be done. Also, obviously, the toilets are fitted with smoke alarms, so there is no smoking. However, some passengers will still try to have a little crafty cigarette, I can tell you. So you do have to watch out for that. So after the drinks and the food, then there may be a bit of a break. So the cabin crew may be able to have something to eat and have a drink and have a bit of a break themselves, but they will still need to be vigilant and be aware of the passengers, and anyone, as I said, who presses their call bell must be attended to straight away. So a passenger could become ill, so cabin crew may have to clear up some vomit, or they may have to help a passenger who has got an upset stomach. Obviously, children may be on the flight, and if they're very young, the cabin crew may need to help the parents to occupy the child with some colouring books or getting them some sweets or some chocolate or something. Or the child may be suffering with earache, so the cabin crew can also advise the parent what to do in that situation. Obviously, there is always the risk and the chance that a passenger can become seriously ill, and that did happen on a couple of my flights. A lady actually suffered from a heart attack and she had to be laid out in the aisle of the aircraft and had to stay there for landing. So it was quite a traumatic experience. And we did have a very nice thank you letter from the lady who, she did survive the heart attack and she went to hospital and she did survive. But she sent a really nice thank you letter to all of the cabin crew saying that she was very grateful to all of their help, which was really nice. The duty-free service will be next, and this involves the cabin crew using their selling techniques to encourage the passengers to buy the goods that they are selling on board. And this was part of the flight that I really enjoyed, as it was a chance to stop and chat and have a bit of conversation with the passengers and ask them if it was the return flight, how their holiday was, or if it was the outward flight, what they were going to do when they got to their destination or where they were staying and all of that. So I really did enjoy that part of the flight. It was quite a relaxed time of the flight, and I would use my expertise to help passengers to buy some perfume or some aftershave, and obviously try the testers that we had, and also the different types of skincare that I'd used as well. As I said in part one, there may be another drink service if it's a longer flight like this one to Cyprus is. So there will probably be another drink service. That is if the duty-free service hasn't taken too long. And sometimes when it's a return flight, the duty-free service will just go on and on and on because all of the passengers want to buy something as it's their last bit of their holiday. So they're either buying gifts for their friends and family, or they want to treat themselves to a nice present. So depending on how long the duty-free service lasts, there may or there may not be another drink service. And sometimes this can be much to the annoyance of the other passengers who don't want to buy any duty-free and just want to buy another drink. So towards the end of the flight, the captain or the first officer will put the fasten seatbelt sign on, which indicates to the cabin crew that they must prepare the cabin for landing. So either number one or another member of the cabin crew will do an announcement telling passengers this and that they must return to their seats. The cabin crew will then go through the cabin collecting any waste that is lying around and asking everybody to fasten their seat belts and going through the same process as they did before, making sure that there's no bags on the floor at the overwing exits and so on. Again, once the cabin crew have finished securing the cabin and the galley, the cabin secure checks and the galley secure check will be passed to the number one, who will then pass that check on to the captain and the first officer. Soon after this, the captain or the first officer will alert the cabin crew that they must go to their seats and strap themselves in for landing. So once the aircraft has landed and the aircraft is taxiing to its stand, the number one or the cabin crew manager will make an announcement welcoming the passengers to Paphos and advising of the local time. They will give information about Paphos Airport and also about onward travel if that's applicable, and they will also state to the passengers that they must remain in their seats until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the fasten seatbelt sign has been switched off by the captain. And the captain gives the go-ahead to the number one or the cabin crew manager, who will then ask the cabin crew members to disarm their doors and cross-check. This means that you actually remove the bar of the slide and put it back into the door. You then cross-check with your opposite cabin crew member's door to make sure they have disarmed their slide as well. And then that check is passed to the number one, who then passes the check to the captain. The passengers will then normally disembark and get onto a bus using the forward door and one of the rear doors. If there is an air bridge attached to the aircraft, then obviously the passengers will just use the forward door. Following this, the cabin crew then check the cabin and the overhead lockers to see if anybody has left anything behind, and if they do find any belongings belonging to the passengers, then these will be passed to the ground crew. Any disabled passengers requiring a wheelchair will wait until all of the passengers have left, and then the wheelchair will be brought on board. Following this, catering will be uploaded from the hold into the galleys. So the number 1 and the number 2 will be busy making sure that they have everything they need for the return flight. Depending on the airline, cleaners may come on and clean the aircraft and the toilets. However, this doesn't always happen. So on some airlines, the cabin crew are actually responsible for making sure that the aircraft is tidy and presentable for the passengers' return flight. As I mentioned before, this may be a time that the cabin crew can sit down and have something to eat, but obviously depending on time constraints and the airline, this may not be possible. Then before you know it, the cabin crew manager or number 1 will announce that passengers are on their way, and you then have to start the process all over again. As I mentioned before, the return flight can be very busy and the passengers can be very demanding, unless it's a night flight, of course, and then the passengers just want to go to sleep. But yes, on the return flight, they can be very, very busy. But I always enjoyed the busyness of the return flight, especially if it was a long flight, because I wouldn't have time to think about how tired I was and how long there was left to go until I could go home. So once we land back at base, then that's the time where we go back to the crew room and we have a debrief. So we go through everything that happened during the flight, if there were any incidents or accidents or anything really that we need to talk about. We also make sure that any cash taken actually balances with what was sold on the flights, and that any cash taken is also counted and also balances. The number 2 then, who was responsible for the bars, would then take the cash to the bank. Usually another member of the cabin crew would go with the number 2. We would all then get onto the car park bus and go back to our respective cars and home. So there you have it. Now you know exactly what goes on for, during and after a flight when you are an air hostess or cabin crew. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and if you do have any questions, then please put them in the comments down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I have had a fly flying around my head for the whole of this video, which has been very, very annoying. So now I am going to get rid of it. Honestly, it's right here. It's right here. I think he wants to be on the video, actually. Thanks so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. And I do hope that you will like this video and subscribe to my channel. As I've said before, that will really help this channel to grow. Thanks so much and see you soon. Bye-bye.